Good morning. Last time we looked at the first verse of chapter 5 of the Sefer Yetzirah, the ancient Jewish book of creation, and that verse introduced the meanings of the 12 plain letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And we saw that those meanings all corresponded to personal human experiences. Today, I want to talk about the second verse of chapter 5 of the Sefer Yetzirah, and this verse continues with the 12 plain letters of the Hebrew alphabet, but this time it's going to show how those letters fit into what we've called the cube of space, that very early mystical model for the creation. Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen here. And it looks like we're ready to go with Sefer Yetzirah 5:2. So, first I have the late Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's translation, 12 elementals. And here he just gives the sort of English letters to represent those 12 Hebrew letters. And he goes on to say their foundation is the 12 diagonal boundaries. The east upper boundary, the east northern boundary, the east lower boundary, the south upper boundary, the southeastern boundary, the south lower boundary, the west upper boundary, the west southern boundary, the west lower boundary, the north upper boundary, the northwestern boundary, the north lower boundary. They extend continually until eternity of eternities, and it is they that are the boundaries of the universe. Okay. What he is actually talking about here are the 12 edges of that cube. But now let's take a look at my translation. And my translation is not really taken directly from the Hebrew that we have here that Rabbi Kaplan used. He's translating from the Gra version of the Sefer Yetzirah. My translation is related more to the Sadia version, except in the Sadia version, they go around the cube in a counterclockwise direction, but for good reasons, I go in a clockwise direction. Okay, so what do I have here? 12 plain. Hey, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yud, Lamed, Nun, Samek, Ein, Sadi, Kuf. Their foundation is 12 diagonal boundaries. Boundary east-north, boundary east-ascent, boundary east-below, boundary south-east, boundary south-ascent, boundary south-below, boundary west-south, boundary west-ascent, boundary west-below, boundary northwest, boundary north-ascent, boundary north-below. And they are permitted to go until forever. Behold, they are the boundaries of the world. Okay, now, when it says ascent here, that means top, above. Okay, now let's go into this a little bit more deeply. What is most important in this verse is the correspondence between the letters and the diagonal boundaries. However, what is meant by a diagonal boundary in this verse can easily be misunderstood. The Hebrew word that is employed is alakson, and this word actually means the longest side of a triangle. For example, in a right triangle, this would be the hypotenuse, which is usually oriented so that it looks like a diagonal line from the bottom to the top of the triangle. If we now imagine creating triangles by drawing lines from the center of a cube to its various corner points, then the longest side of each triangle will be an edge of the cube. Thus, the 12 diagonal boundaries are nothing more than the 12 edges found on a typical cube. So imagine the center point of this cube, and from that point drawing, let's say, a line to this corner point and a line to this corner point. That looks something like this over here. And you create a triangle, and the longest side is going to be the edge of this cube. So that's what we're calling the diagonal. In this particular passage, by the way, I'm generally following the Sadia version rather than the Gra version, even though I go around the cube in the clockwise direction like the Gra, instead of the counterclockwise direction like the Sadia version. The letter assignments are made to the 12 edges in such a way that each set of 3 tends to describe the letter bet, which is closed on 3 sides and open on 1. So this is the letter bet here. 3 sides closed, this side is open. And when you put these letters, 3 letters here, they are all on the same side of the cube. And it's like describing the letter bet. Okay, the letter bet stands for a bracha, a blessing. And this conforms to the teaching in the Zohar that the world was created with the letter bet so that it would be a blessing. Furthermore, the letter bet consists of 2 opposite sides connected by a third, and this reiterates a basic teaching of the Sefer Yetzirah, that creation depends upon one thing opposite another, with a mediating principle in between. In the Sadia version, one finds a pattern of center, one side, and then the other side for the placement of the letters. And the same pattern of center, side, side occurs with respect to the placement of the plain letters on the diagonal branches of the Sephirotic tree of life. Furthermore, the counterclockwise pattern found in the Sadia version seems to tell the story of humanity's fall from grace, followed by eventual redemption. Essentially, in the Sadia version, the placement of these letters starts on what we'll call the east face of the cube, and then it goes counterclockwise from east to north to west to south. Okay. In other words, we begin our story in Eden, which is symbolized by the east, the direction of connection with the light. This is followed by a fall and harsh times, as symbolized by the bitter cold of the north. As a result of the fall, we have to work hard to plow the earth and grow our own food. And the earth is symbolized by the west, the direction of the setting sun. Finally, however, there is the promise that we will be redeemed and that life will become easier and more joyous again. And this is symbolized by the direction of the warm south, where life is not constantly surrounded by the bitterness. However, I've chosen the clockwise direction because that represents the way things should be. In other words, like the beginning of the day, life begins in the east. Next, our childhood should be peaceful and nurturing, and these are attributes associated with the pleasant weather in the south. Following this, we should become responsible adults with our own lives, which is represented by the west, the direction at the end of the day, where we have experienced life and now have time to pause and reflect. And lastly, we reach the north direction when we become elders. At this point, life is more constrained for us, just as life is harsher in the north. But we also have wisdom to share with the younger generations. And below now are the placements, as I do them, of the 12 letters along the edges of the cube of space. So we start with the letters Hey, Vav, Zayin. We go in the order that they occur in the Hebrew alphabet. And for each triad, like Sadia does, I put the beginning letter of that triad sort of in the middle, and it goes from middle to top to bottom. So Hey, Vav, Zayin. Okay. And then in the south face, which is the front face, we have Het, Tet, Yud. And then in the western face, we have Lamet, Nun, Samet. And then in the northern face, we have Ein, Zadi, Guf. Those are the 12 plain letters placed upon the edges of the cube, which are also known here as the diagonals of the cube. Now, another reason why I have placed plain letters in a pattern of center, top, bottom that continues clockwise around the cube of space is because this easily corresponds to the placement of these letters in the Sefer tree of life that follows a clockwise pattern of center, left, right. Recall, too, that this pattern is also a coding of the teaching in the Sefer Yetzirah that the basis for creation is having one thing opposite another with a third principle that allows for interaction. Now let's look at some pictures of the diagonal branches of the tree of life. In each picture, imagine the tree as a diagram on the floor where you're standing in the center as you go around it counterclockwise. Okay, so imagine this diagram here being on the floor. You're standing right here at the center. You're facing this way. And look at how these the first three plain letters are placed. And by the way, in the Sephirodic or Kabbalistic tree of life, the edges of the cube, they actually literally appear as diagonals in this diagram. So on the cube, we had Hey in the center, and then Zayin on the top. I'm sorry. Hey in the center, Vav on the top, Zayin down below. Here, if you're standing here facing this way, for these three diagonals, you've got Hey in the center, Vav to the left, and Zayin to the right. Okay? And we'll continue counterclockwise around this Kabbalistic tree of life. So for the next triad, on the cube, it's Het, Tet, Yud. And sure enough, if you're now looking this way, you got Het in the center, Tet on your left, Yud on your right. Okay, now continuing clockwise around this tree, let's see. All right, now you're facing in this direction. And on the cube, you've got Lamed in the center, Nun on top, and Samak down below. And on the tree over here, facing this direction, you have Lamed in the center, Samak on your left. I'm sorry, Lamed in the center, Nun on your left, Samak on your right. And lastly, if you're facing in this direction, this corresponds to the back face of the cube where you have Ein in the middle, Zadi on top, Kuf on bottom. And over here, facing this way, you've got Ein in the center or the middle. And once more, on your left, you got Zadi. On your right, you've got Kuf. So, doing it this way, we can see, certainly this is the way the Sephirodic tree of life probably wants us to do it. To stand here and go around clockwise. And the pattern of these 12 plain letters grouped as triads as we go around the tree, it's exactly the same. It mirrors the pattern that we have on this cube of space over here. If we follow Sadia Gayon's way of doing it, but just go around clockwise instead of counterclockwise. Okay, so this is all amazing to me. The Kabbalistic or Sephirodic tree of life is really the same as the ancient cube of space, that early model for the universe in Jewish mysticism, but it's just sort of the cube unfolded. Okay, below now is another table showing how my placement of the letters compares with what is found in the various other versions of the text. So here you can look at how I do it, how the Gra version does it. That's done the short version, the long version, the Saudia version. If you want to pause that and peruse that for a while, be my guest. But now I'll go on to the next slide. All right. In spite of which edges one might assign the 12 plain letters to, the final result is that we now have the letters serving as a model for physical three-dimensional space. In particular, we have defined that cube that is often referred to as the cube of space. And this completes the argument that the universe was created with the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The 3 mother letters correspond to 3 spatial axes. The 7 double letters correspond to the 6 directions plus center. And the 12 plain letters complete the cube by corresponding to the 12 defining edges. Here's a diagram showing the correspondence of all 22 letters as I place them on the cube. Okay, so there I've got them all at once. And I could add to this diagram the letters, the 3 mother letters corresponding to these 3 spatial axes. I could add on also the 7 double letters corresponding to the 6 directions in the center. That, along with the 12 plain letters corresponding to various edges, that would make a very good model for the universe, but also a very complex model, kind of hard to look at in just 2 dimensions and figure out, okay, which letter goes with what. And that may be one reason why this cube was essentially unfolded and transformed into the modern Kabbalistic tree of life. It's just a little easier to read the tree. When you collapse something 3-dimensional down into 2 dimensions, it can be a little hard to read. Okay, on to the last slide. And finally, recall that while God, through 10 utterances, has created the 3 spatial axes, the 6 directions, and the center, we complete the edges of the cube of space through the contribution of our own personal experiences. And that way, each of us is a partner in the creative process. And we spend a lifetime completing and perfecting our own version of the universe in partnership with something greater than ourselves. Okay. Let me also reiterate. I'll go ahead and stop sharing here, and then I'll reiterate. I want to again emphasize what the 10 Sefirot were originally in the Sefer Yetzirah. There are many ways we can describe those 10 Sefirot originally, but think of each description as just a different viewpoint, another face of the same thing. So first and foremost, the 10 Sefirot are 10 declarations of constraint. And these are the 10 utterances that God makes in the first chapter of Genesis in order to bring about this creation. The earliest geometric model for this creation, for our universe, is a cube that I and some others like to call the cube of space. And, this different parts of this cube correspond to the 10 Sefirot, as given at the end of the first chapter of the Sefer Yetzirah, where you have, breath, and then breath from breath, and then water, fire, up, down, east, west, north, south, and so on. And we saw that those correspond to sides of a cube, and they also correspond to letters in the Hebrew alphabet. We have these 3 spatial axes corresponding to the 3 mother letters, Aleph, Mem, Shin. And then we have the 6 directions plus the center corresponding to the 7 double letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And that breath from breath corresponds to what's also called the Holy Palace right at the center. And then we have the 12 plain letters corresponding to the edges of the cube of space. Okay, so the 10 Sefirot, the 10 declarations of God, corresponds to all those things we mentioned, the breath from breath, water, fire, 6 directions, and we have those corresponding to the 3 mother letters and the 7 double letters. Those are the 10 Sefirot, looked at as declarations, as parts of this cube of space, and as 10 of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet. But it's the remaining 12 letters that highlight our contribution to creation. Those are our personal experience, which complete the edges or the boundaries of the cube of space. That, again, is our contribution to creation. That is what we contribute in partnership with God. We complete the universe through our own personal experiences, and each of us is, in a sense, literally a separate universe. We each complete that universe in our own way through our own experiences. That's how it is. Okay, I'll stop at this point. So again, I'll say shalom, goodbye, be in peace, be whole. And I have one more verse left to cover from the Sefer Yetzirah. We'll do that next time. And then I'll have some other videos that will continue with this series on the essence of Jewish mysticism. So long, and I hope to see you soon.